Order and roll call. Beginning with John DeVoe.
Here.
Jeff Watson.
Here.
Lee Brown.
Here.
Ellen Carrick.
Here.
Vicki Good. Here. Ken Hartsfield.
Here.
Charles Schrader.
Here.
And for the record, Jerry Penland and Peter Scanlon are absent.
Thank you. Pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes of May 24th. Any amendments, changes? Okay. Motion? Approve minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes. Second. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Sign no. Approved. Public hearings none. Item 4, work session. Consider amendments to the Woodland Park Municipal Code 18.09.090 V as in Victor with the maximum storage compartment size of mini storage warehouses. That's it. Okay. Would you like to, from the standpoint of the city, talk about which one did?
Yes, Chairman DeVoe, I have a very brief presentation and I'll go through it and it'll be a summary of everything we've done to date. So, today we're here to talk about self-storage facilities. It is an ordinance that we have been drafting and revising, ordinance number 1324. It's a zoning text amendment to address the self-storage use within the jurisdiction of the City of Woodland Park. So you'll recall on April 12th of 2018, staff first brought this subject to the Planning Commission as a public hearing, and we had drafted the ordinance. After much discussion at that public hearing from the Planning Commissioners as well as from the public, the Planning Commission directed staff to host a work session. So we hosted a work session on May 10th, 2018, where we started with the same draft that was presented on April 12th, and after a robust discussion, again on the part of the public that attended and the planning commissioners that were here, staff got some really good guidance and some direction on how to change this proposed draft ordinance. And at the end of that meeting on May 10th, the Planning Commission decided they wanted to see a revision to the draft ordinance one more time in a work session format, and all the revisions based on the Planning Commission's direction have been made, and what was in the packet and sent out to all of you is the draft ordinance for general discussion and direction from tonight's work session, which is May 10th, 2018. So, the proposed code amendment that is before you for discussion has a few items that we are looking at specifically. It will allow for the storage compartments to be larger than 300 square foot so that things, personal property items such as cars, trailers, RVs, light trucks, those types of large items can be stored in a self-storage facility. We're looking at changing the self-storage use from a permitted use to a conditional use in the heavy service commercial light industrial zone district. And then we're changing the reference from mini storage, which is what it's referred to as now. So we're changing it from mini storage to self-storage, and we are also correcting a typo in the matrix in the PUD column where it should be changed from conditional to permitted use, to permitted conditionally. And permitted conditionally is the type of permit for all PUD uses. A PUD can be written and crafted by the developer or the applicant to suit the needs of the types of uses that they're proposing within their PUD, their planned unit development. So they can craft their own limitations, their own uses, all of those things. Every other use in that column is listed as PC. I have no idea why this was listed as C. but we believe it's a typo. So that's just a miscellaneous change. So again, benefits and advantages to this text amendment. Staff believes it fills a gap in the city to address storage of large items. We believe it responds to a community need to store large items like RVs, for instance. We believe it creates opportunities and flexibility for both the storage industry and for residents of this city and residents that own items like RVs. And we believe that the PC review process, changing it from a permitted use to a conditional use in the industrial zone district, would allow for the applications to come before this commission, and it would have an impact assessment in front of a public hearing, and that would be beneficial for all concerned. So those are some of the advantages. Specifically, what we're changing is the definition, section 1806578. It is the definition of warehouse mini storage, and all we're doing is changing the reference from mini storage to self-storage. So the definition itself, substantive portion of the definition is not changing. We're just calling it self-storage. And then this is the section, this is the row in the matrix that is section V. So it's 18.090.090.V of the matrix. And it is the wholesale trade, distribution, and warehousing storage section of this matrix. And you can see we've changed every reference to mini to self-storage. And then we've changed and eliminated 3A, which was the maximum size for a storage compartment of 300 square feet. So we've eliminated that, but all of the other specifications within this use still stand. So for instance, there shall be no outside storage of goods or materials of any type on this site for a self-storage warehouse. So that still remains in place. The only thing we're changing here is removing that 300 square foot compartment to create greater flexibility. And then you can see in the column for the industrial zone, we've changed it from an outright permitted use to a conditional use. So every instance of the self-storage use is now a conditional use. So you will see before this commission every application for self-storage, where before you wouldn't have seen it if it was coming into the industrial zone. And as I mentioned earlier, the PUD column is just a typo. Instead of conditional use, it should say permitted conditionally. So those are the proposed changes. Based on direction I received tonight, I can finish the ordinance and produce it in a draft that will then come before you. Hopefully July 12th would be the next available meeting where it would come before this planning commission and a public hearing. And it's possible we may be able to get it to council for first reading on August 2nd and council for public hearing on August 16th, based on what happens tonight. That concludes my staff report. Mr. Chairman, are there any questions of me?
So we understand the difference between conditional, permitted, and permitted conditional. All PUDs, and the one they were talking about, have to come before us. They're all conditional. So in other words, it isn't a permitted use, it's a permitted conditional use. So it'll still come through us. So anything within that first category, which is a heavy service area or PUD, we'll have a public hearing and we'll hear about it before it goes on to the council. And I kind of like that personally. All we're looking for tonight is a consensus for her to go ahead and prepare the ordinance and then come back here on July 12th to have the actual public hearing and have the ordinance read, and we will then either pass or fail or whatever or council on August 2nd.
That is correct, and if there are any changes that the commission would like to see, it's a good time to discuss those now.
Questions?
Okay. In the revisions of subsection .578, it says primary use for the storage of household materials. And then on the matrix, it says storage of personal property. And so I didn't know if there's, personal property includes boats, RVs, well, household materials would not, I wouldn't think. I don't know if there's a discrepancy there, or if we need to expand one or the other definition.
I believe the two are synonymous. We could make those words the same. We could say
I think you ought to.
personal property.
I agree. I think
In both
they should be
instances.
defined.
That's an excellent point, although it does create some ambiguity in that section .5 sub 8 in the second sentence. We're not sure what commercial warehouses are entirely, except in part by the previous sentence, which says it's household materials. If it's personal property now, that could start picking up, big, pieces of steel or, whatever commercial inventory somebody might have. Just
So-
Research personal property definition.
Well, I think there is some common sense with personal property, and do you agree that a boat would be personal property?
Sure.
An RV, piece of metal?
Well, they're all personal. Is commercial warehouse defined elsewhere?
There is, further down in this section, there is a use category for commercial.
As long as it's clearly separated, then because the basic point you're making is absolutely right.
The
It should be
commercial
consistent.
warehouse and storage is separated from the self-storage.
Ellen, you're next.
I had a question about the maximum height of the self-storage facility, as well as if we're saying that it can be larger than 300 square feet, is that possibly limited then in size because of over here on 5C, building coverage shall not exceed 60% of the site's land area? So two questions, the height of the storage building, and number two, larger than 300 square feet, so is there a max?
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll start with the first question. So you can see, even just looking at this table for the use for self-storage facilities, it's only allowed in community commercial, service commercial, heavy service commercial, light industrial, or as a PUD. So there are only 4 zone districts. Within those 4 zone districts, there are height restrictions, and that's what the facility would be subject to. So for instance, in the service commercial zone district, I believe it's 35 feet.
Yep.
In the community commercial zone district, I believe it's 35 feet too. Actually, in all 3 of those, in industrial as well. Sally's got these memorized. I'd have to look it up, but it would be 35 feet. That would be the maximum
That's the
height.
city's maximum.
That's the maximum height in those zone districts. And so that facility would be subject to that zone district, all the limitations in that zone district, including the setbacks, the height, all of those things. And so here's a
PUD allows for the developer to request their dimensional standards, which height is one of those dimensional standards. So, but we would try to keep that consistent with the other commercial uses in the area. So 35 feet is what's allowed in the commercial zone.
So your second question was, is there a maximum? So we're getting rid of the 300 square
Right.
foot maximum, and we're not replacing it with another maximum because it would be arbitrary. We saw in the representative, Ms. Linda Murray, that submitted a wonderful PowerPoint and a detailed description of the industry standards, that there are a variety of sizes depending on what people need or want and what type of personal property they're storing. And we don't even want to pretend to limit that based on what might be more flexible for the citizens.
And they'll be coming in front of us as well.
Right. And so that's just compartment size.
I've got a question. I know Mr. Scanlon was concerned about this from the last meeting. When you're using the word storage compartments, is that for pods or is it an actual building being built?
Those are the compartments within the building, because mini self-storage warehouse has to be enclosed. So it's a building, fully enclosed.
Is that defined somewhere else?
No.
Because I think this needs to be defined, because otherwise you're going to have people, you're going to have a half an acre lot, for instance, and people are going to bring pods in and store them there. I mean, you want pod
It says an enclosed structure. So a structure is a building to us. We wouldn't consider pods a structure. Those are containers.
Okay.
Other folks?
Yeah, I missed the last meeting, but last one I came to, there was a section and a lot of public discussion about sales of RVs, facilities, and that sort of thing. Is that covered elsewhere, or are we ignoring that?
We are not making any amendments to any section related to sales. We're only now, we've stepped back and we're only dealing with the storage of self-storage facilities.
So this could not, these facilities could not include a budget rental facility outside of it?
Insofar as truck and trailer rental is allowed on a piece of property, so it would be allowed as a permitted use on a service commercial zone, for instance, you could have multiple uses on a piece of property.
Okay.
So it's possible that you could have both.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Anybody else?
Okay? Sure. If there's no size limit on these units, what separates that from a warehouse?
This, again, is specifically for personal property, so it would be for your stuff, my stuff, that type of thing. It wouldn't be for commercial items
So,
or a distribution center or any of that kind of stuff.
so Walmart couldn't store stuff?
No.
One question I have is, since we've been doing without this since 1996, why do we currently feel that there's suddenly a need for that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this started with a discussion on RVs and the need to deal with RVs on multiple levels in the city. One of those needs was the storage of RVs. So currently, right now, we don't have a facility or an ability for people to store RVs, and the commercial storage, the self-storage facilities don't allow for it because of this compartment size. So again, we're providing flexibility and filling a gap for RV storage.
So the storage units that are going to be going in and the facility down at the Saddle Club property, they're going to be, if this doesn't go through, they're going to be limited to 300 square feet for the current compartment size.
Yes, that's our current regulation.
What they're trying to do is on that back row, on the lot line in the back, is put the ability for somebody to take a 8.5 foot wide, 14 foot high, 40 foot long motorhome in a heated, controlled environment. Okay, that's what I think that market is for. And we'll find out more about that when we get to that July 12th meeting. Right?
July
The
12th is
applicant's going to be here, and we'll talk to him about it.
July 12th is July 19th is the public hearing in front of City Council for the Woodland Park storage facility.
What is July 12th question mark on this next step?
This is the ordinance
Okay.
that is going before City Council. So I think we were talking about, were you talking about the Woodland Park storage facility case, that application?
I'm saying about the ability for them to make units bigger than 300. Wouldn't that go right along with hand in hand with what they're asking for?
It's going at the same time, it's almost concurrent. We may have to, they're going in front of council on July 19th, and this isn't going in front of council for public hearing until it was August. So this change will be a little later. We could amend the ordinance for that case so that it says it relates to changes in the zoning, in the text, so that if the text changes, then they are not limited to 300 square feet anymore. That would clean it up. Yeah.
Any other questions? All we're looking for tonight, Mr. Volpe. Come on, you gotta have one on the paper. What's the question? Norma?
So I was thinking about one thing. If I own those easements, or whatever, I can store them in my unit, even though I'm not selling them to anybody else. You're talking about something that you're storing until somebody buys it.
Not a commercial product.
Right. So if I buy some stuff, with building materials, I can store it in my unit.
Dave, we're looking to stretch this. You got a question back there?
No, sir.
Okay.
All good.
We're looking for a consensus. Okay?
Does the Planning Commission feel comfortable if I bring forward an ordinance that looks very much like the draft that you're looking at on July 12th?
We're not voting on anything in that. We're just
Yeah.
telling her to prepare that.
So the 12th will actually vote
Yes.
on what
Yes.
you're...
And it will be a full
It'll be a
public hearing.
Correct.
People will be
Okay.
back to it.
So this is just a consensus recommendation.
That's all it is.
I support the changes that are proposed with the clarification of this similar terms.
That sounds great.
So do I.
So do I.
Think you okay with that? We're all okay with that.
Wonderful. Perfect.
We're going on.
Yep.
No, we'll finish our agenda.
Do we go to reports?
Yes.
Okay. She would not say that she didn't have a report. I just know that. She has a report. Report from our,
Just in terms of our schedule, we will not have a meeting on June 28th, but we will have one on July 12th. So plan on that. It's also likely that our second meeting in July, which would be the 26th, we're looking to have some subdivisions submitted here soon. If they're able to get their subdivision in by June 26th, then we'll calendar for that date. So do plan on being here at least on July 12th and possibly July 26th. Secondly, I did want to call your attention to our May monthly report. I highlighted the adoption of the new building code that Pikes Peak Regional Building Department had worked with us closely on. This also adopts the 2015 international codes for commercial, residential, as well as mechanical, fuel gas, elevators and escalators safety, energy conservation, and the existing building codes. So our Board of Review worked very hard since beginning last August on reviewing the building code proposals, and Regional Building Department was very reasonable about adjusting 4 items in the International Energy Code. So it was a quite interesting and successful process to get that adopted. As far as the statistics for the city planning and building department at this point, I think it's important to note we have issued 23 single-family permits since the beginning of the year, so for the first 5 months, and that's quite a few for us. And we actually had 4 new permits come in this week, so we're on a roll with our single families. And you can look through the statistics there and see that year to date, we have issued, in terms of valuation, over $18 million, almost $19 million worth of construction activity in the city. So it's a pretty robust year for construction activity. That's all that I have.
anybody else have anything for us like to talk about? Anything you'd like to bring up? We'll talk about clarification.
No?
Anything else?
Motion for adjournment? I'd like to move, we adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's got to be a record. 26.